This is the last video in a series of videos on AI and teaching. I purposely left the topic of teaching writing for last because for me, the process of creating these videos tracks very closely with the writing process that I've used as both an author of 2 teaching-related books and as a National Board Certified Language Arts teacher. While I was working on this whole series of videos, I very consciously looked for ways that AI could help me save time and effort because I wanted to be able to share whatever tips I could put together in this final video. And there were ways that AI helped me save time and effort. But also, this series of videos on AI and teaching has taken more time and more work on my part than almost any other series of videos that I've ever done. In fact, I should probably start by explaining this shirt. I like to record a series of videos in the same shirt, just in case I have a thought that actually belongs in another video. I like to be able to mix and match them, but I have changed into this same shirt so many times while recording this series of videos that I am now tired of it. And after I'm done talking about teaching in the age of AI, you will probably never see this shirt in another video, which actually makes a pretty good jumping off point for talking about how to teach writing in the age of AI. My name is Roxana Eldon. I run the Maintain and Stay Sane program for teachers, which helps teachers make the job and their lives more manageable. If you're in charge of teaching students to write, you are running into a whole series of issues right now, but they all kind of fall under the umbrella of something I'll call time alignment. We are intuitively used to the idea that it takes longer to write something than it does to read it. This has been true pretty much since the beginning of writing. When you read an email, you're assuming that the person spent a little longer typing their thoughts into words than you are spending reading it. When you read a book, it's going to take you a couple of weeks, and you're assuming that that writer probably spent years creating that book. The value in a piece of writing comes from this unspoken contract between the writer and the reader, that the writer has done the majority of the mental processing. As soon as you sense that this is not the case, the relationship between the writer and the reader changes. This is one of the reasons that AI-based cheating is so frustrating to teachers, because the idea that you are looking at an essay that you thought a student created, and then little by little you start to realize that you are marking something up that was created by a computer in seconds is just a gut punch. That's emotionally very hard, very frustrating. It sets you up with a confrontation with the student, but it also reflects the fact that we are suddenly in this new world, both inside and outside the classroom, where our understanding of writing has been flipped on its head. We now have a way of producing words faster than any human can mentally process them. And often those words sound smart, they can be coherent, they can even be useful. But those words are not writing, because writing is not a process of producing words. Writing is a process of refining your thoughts so that you can hand them off to someone else. In fact, if you look behind me, this is a collection of some of my favorite books that I just like to have in the room with me while I'm recording. And one of those books is Stephen King's very well-known and very wonderful book called On Writing. In this book, Stephen King makes the case that writing is a form of mental telepathy. You're transferring the thoughts that are inside your head across time and space to another person or other people somewhere out in the world. So the question is, if that's your goal, is that goal still necessary and possible in the age of AI? And is there some room for AI to help with that goal? And I would say that the answer to all of those questions is yes, as long as you keep your eye on that goal. In fact, one of the ways that AI can help you communicate better is by bringing things into your skill set that would have previously been impossible or required help from an expert. In a writing context, that can include some aspects of research or fact-checking, or help with the visuals, or communicating in a new type of media. That's one of the areas where AI has really helped me communicate better. The truth is, I don't have video editing skills. I have Word doc editing skills and writing skills. The video editing program that I use transcribes what I'm saying into what looks like a Word doc. And you edit the transcript the same way that you would edit a Word doc, which means that the skill of video editing now feels very much like a skill that I've used for decades. Before this type of software existed, I had no desire to make videos. The idea of looking a little waveform and trying to figure out where I coughed or paused or touched my nose would have just been so frustrating for me and so far from what I was good at and what I was trying to do that I just didn't even have the interest. So in this particular area, AI has brought something into my life that has been a lot of fun to use. And I just am so happy that I'm able to express some of these things that I've been writing about for 20 years in a video format. That's an example from the more successful end of how AI has helped my communication. Now, here's an example from the less successful end. I used AI to try to generate a list of ideas for videos I might want to make about AI and teaching. What I ended up with was a list that looked good at first glance, looked very coherent and authoritative, the way that almost all AI generated stuff does. But when I looked through it, it ended up being a complete time suck because out of the 20 great sounding ideas that AI gave me, there were one or two things in there that maybe sparked some type of idea that I could have potentially used, but really none of it was what I wanted to say. And if I had done a video on any of these topics, I would have been sinking my own human work time into building out a video that was basically just an AI work slop idea. Not only would AI not have saved me time, AI would have cost me a tremendous amount of time just to get me to an end product that I wasn't particularly proud of. These two examples are on different ends of the spectrum as far as how helpful AI can be for your writing. On the one hand, it can feel like it gives you superpowers. And on the other hand, it can make more work for you because it can take the ball and run with it in a way that doesn't reflect what's in anybody's head, let alone yours. And then now there's real work in walking back the thought process to where it was that AI got away from you and made this into something that isn't writing. So one of the ways that you can approach writing in the age of AI is to walk students through from thought to finished product and talk about what are the parts of this that you cannot skip if you want to make sure you're really going through the writing process. And also if you want to make sure that you are getting the practice of refining your thoughts on paper. As you can see from this Google search, there are a lot of different ways that teachers break down the writing process to teach it to students. All of these can work, but all of the steps of all of these versions of the writing process can actually be grouped into 3 categories: knowing what you want to say, saying what you want to say, and making sure you said what you want to say. And these categories don't necessarily go in order. You jump around between them because, again, writing is a process of refining your thoughts. Here's a quick rundown of all 3 of those categories and how you may want to approach them with your students. There is a more detailed version of that on my website, which is linked in the description below this video. So step one, you got to figure out what you want to say in this piece of writing. Before you can share your thoughts, you need to have some idea of what the thoughts are that you want to share. Are there ways that AI can help you if you're stuck at this stage? Yes, there are. You can ask AI to create something that looks like a brainstormed list of thoughts, but you have to be very, very careful because you may actually have less work in front of you when you're staring at a blank page than if you first have to go through 20 AI created suggestions where 19 and a half of them are just garbage. And then after you do the work of figuring out which 19 of the suggestions are useless, what do you do with that half suggestion that might work? That could end up taking you more time, more effort, and producing a lower quality final product than if you just gave yourself some time to stare at that blank page. So again, the first part of any writing process happens inside your head, and it's having some idea of what those thoughts are that you want to share. Then, after you know what you want to say, Step 2 is to say what you want to say. This step can include everything from getting your outline on paper to creating a first draft. The point is that the thoughts inside the writer's head are coming out into the world where the writer can now work with them in some way. There are ways that AI can help a writer when they're stuck, but you have to be very, very careful at this stage that AI does not take the ball and run with it and get to a place where it does not reflect what you are trying to say. I also want to be clear that in this video, I'm only addressing situations where students are not deliberately cheating. I have another video in this series that is about how to define cheating in the age of AI. But if a student hands you something that AI wrote and they're pretending that they wrote it, that is not really a writing issue at all. So I guess it might just make sense for me to start by talking about how I used AI in the saying what I want to say part of this video. I had an ongoing list of notes that I would write down as they came to me on this topic, how to teach writing in the age of AI. And I got to a point where I was stuck with about 3 typed pages of jumbled notes. A lot of them were repetitive. I couldn't tell what was off topic. And I was really having trouble figuring out how these thoughts came together. I ended up using Anthropic's Claude AI and typing in this prompt that you see on the screen here. Here is the exact wording of the prompt. I'm going to paste in some brainstormed notes for a YouTube video on how AI can and can't help with the writing process. Use these notes to come up with a framework I can share that goes step by step through the writing process and explains how AI can and can't help. Use as many of my original ideas as possible, but you don't have to use all of them. If something doesn't fit the outline and you leave it out, tell me at the end what you left out. So, okay, here's how AI organized this information. You can see it made me this kind of drop-down menu where it divided the writing process into 5 different sections, which they do work just as well as what I was seeing on Google. This is not the organization system that I ended up using, but in each of these sections, it says how AI can help, what AI can't replace. And then at the bottom here, you see the basic ideas that it used from my pile of notes. This is what people say about AI. It's like a very eager assistant. And there are many times when it's nice to have a very eager assistant. The best thing I can say about this is that it absolutely got me unstuck. It's like I needed to see it in a different way that AI presented to me in order for me to find those notes usable. So, okay, was this helpful in organizing my thoughts? Yes, it was. Did it get out in front of my thoughts and start to make me say things that I didn't quite mean? Also, yes. Most of what it said was close to my original thoughts, but didn't match them exactly. In fact, there were a couple moments where AI came up with a really good way of phrasing something. And it was only when I tried to elaborate on that phrasing, because I thought it was such a good idea, that I realized this is not exactly what I mean to say. One example is this section here on the screen where AI says that AI writing is not communication, it's a simulation of communication. And then later here it says a student who hands in an AI draft is just passing along a simulation of communication. And the truth was, I love that description. In fact, this is my secret excuse to include it in this video because I think the idea of simulating communication is a great concept to keep in mind with AI. But it actually was not on the topic of what I wanted to say here. And in fact, much of this section says exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to say about writing. It took me several reads to realize that this whole chunk of what AI gave me not only wasn't what I wanted to say, but was leading me in the wrong direction. And it was actually because this was so well phrased that it took me a while to realize this is not what I wanted to say here. Which brings us to one of the big new challenges of AI writing, which is also an issue in AI coding because people are vibe coding so many things that initially seem good but require vetting. It's also an issue in science where AI can suggest these magnificent projects that scientists could take on, but a scientific research project can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of someone's life. Decisions are work, and that is true more than ever. Decisions are work. Exercising judgment is work. Narrowing down possibilities is work. And writing is just one decision after another. The thing to emphasize to students here is that every decision in your writing should be made by you. You know how sometimes you're sending a text message and autofill gets involved and completes your sentence, and sometimes it's a version of what you wanted to say, but sometimes it's really not what you wanted to say? It's probably worth thinking of AI as an autofill that can write 3 pages for you. You need to be even more careful to make sure that you're processing all of that information with a 3-page document that has had a version of autofill involved. If your hands are not on the wheel of saying what you're trying to say, you might be getting into a situation where you are not writing anymore. The final part of the writing process is making sure you said what you wanted to say. What you're really doing is trying to read your own work through the mind of your reader and doing your best guess of how your work will be received. This is where ideally you would also catch any type of own goals in terms of spelling and punctuation and grammar. But historically, since the beginning of writing, this has been one of the things that writers do on behalf of readers. They try to put themselves in the reader's perspective and do their best to imagine how this work will be received. Will the reader understand it? Are there details that need to be explained? And again, is this saying what the writer wants to say to this particular reader? Does this mean that you cannot use AI for editing help? No, you can absolutely use AI for editing help. In fact, AI can help with this part of writing. AI can help be almost like a first set of eyes on what you wrote. AI can even give students personalized feedback that a teacher doesn't have time to give. But also AI can end up taking some of your original thoughts and original phrasing and turning them into something that sounds kind of like you, but not quite, and phrasing your ideas in a way that is kind of like what you want to say, but not exactly. There's just no way around circling back to that final step in the 3-step process. Is this what I want to say? And if it's not quite right, then you're back at step 1. What exactly is it that I want to say? The writing process is really cycling through these 3 steps over and over again until you decide you're ready for the 4th and final step, which is handing off to the reader. This can mean turning in an assignment, hitting send on an email, or publishing an article. This is where the writer turns over the effort, but it's also where they turn over the control. It is now up to the reader how they're going to take in this message. If the stakes of miscommunication are high, this is where you're going to find out if your efforts to communicate failed. And that's why students are learning writing in school. You need to exercise that communication muscle and make it stronger. And teachers are kind of like the personal trainers that help students exercise that muscle. In keeping with that metaphor, AI can act as your spotter. It can help you do a level of heavy lifting that you just wouldn't be able to do on your own. If there is a roadblock that is going to keep you from completing a piece of writing in the first place, it's worth seeing if AI can boost you over that hurdle so you can keep aiming for that goal of getting your message across. But there is no substitute for the thinking process that gets those thoughts out of your head and into a form that makes them usable to another person. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this series on teaching in the age of AI took more time and more effort than I originally anticipated. And that's probably because this is something we're all right in the middle of. And as I've been recording, I have been working through my own thoughts on this topic. My hope is that that effort is coming through in a way that is valuable to you as the viewer of this video. But that is going to be for you to decide, because the moment I publish this video, my writing process is over, and I am handing this off to you. Thank you for watching, and now I'm going to go put this shirt into the laundry and never wear it for another video again.